Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. My name's Amber Grant. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver in Canada. Today I'm going to be sharing some of my work on recognitional justice and urban forestry, which focuses on the community perspectives in Philadelphia in the United States. Just want to quickly acknowledge my co-authors, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada for funding this work, the U.S. Forest Service for organizing this event, and of course, Lemire and Rachel, who are going to be sharing their work with us later today. To everyone in Philly who's made this work possible and who's doing really great work there, and of course, the audience for being here. And so many of us in the room will be aware by now that researchers and urban foresters practitioners have adopted kind of this three-pillar environmental justice framework to consider solutions for more just and equitable cities. The three pillars include distributional, procedural, and recognitional justice. And so kind of just briefly to define those within the context of urban forestry, distributional justice is concerned with the equitable distribution of urban vegetation, so things like parks and trees. Procedural justice is about ensuring fairness, transparency, inclusiveness, and accessibility within decision-making. And recognitional justice, which is our focus for today, involves prioritizing the experiences, perspectives, knowledge, and values of disadvantaged or neglected groups who are often overlooked or excluded from the development of policies and practices that influence both procedural and distributional outcomes. And so without each pillar of what's represented here, even well-intended projects can in some cases perpetuate harm. And so kind of what is the research problem that I'm going to chat a little bit about today? Well, one, there's limited research out there that focuses on how to translate environmental justice principles or this kind of rhetoric into actionable practices. Most studies that exist to date have focused on government institutions or nonprofit experiences, usually overlooking the community-based actors whose grassroots efforts and insights could result in more just approaches to greening. And so in other words, the recognitional justice piece remained underexplored. And so in coming up with this research project, we wanted to kind of know, what are the experiences of urban forest stewards in Philadelphia who are actively seeking to address issues of distribution, procedure, and recognition within urban forestry? And then also, what are some of those kind of socio-political and institutional factors that have influenced their perspectives, their knowledge, their experiences when engaging in community-based work? Before I share some of those findings, I do want to emphasize and acknowledge that Philadelphia as a city and also nonprofits within the city have made an active commitment toward addressing environmental justice, specifically related to the urban forest. There's a lot of incredible staff there that have been doing amazing work for many years now. For example, I just want to highlight some of that work, which is that after leading a very large equity-focused community engagement process, the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation team, with support from the Hinge Collective, created their first Philly Tree Plan, which explicitly focuses on environmental justice and genuine community engagement. The Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, which runs the Tree Tenders program, has complemented these efforts by creating a street tree planting prioritization map, again, in partner with the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation Department. And they've also been offering additional tree tenders classes in Spanish. And so all of these kind of institutions have been doing more than this, but I just want to kind of spotlight some of the work that's been going on. These institutional efforts do show a growing awareness that realizing environmental justice requires coordinated action at multiple levels. Nonetheless, at the same time, implementation challenges persist and recognitional justice remains limited. And so I do want to highlight some of those perspectives today, the overlooked kind of community-based perspectives. And I do want to share some quotes as well from folks, in addition to kind of summarizing some overarching findings from this research project. And so using ethnographic methods as well as interviews with predominantly Black and Brown urban forest stewards, we found that urban planning decisions or tragic events, whether related to trees or not, continue to impact levels of trust, especially toward municipally supported tree care. And so these planning decisions might include things like historical memory of long-term residents remember things like when there were municipal budget cuts in the 60s and 70s and street trees were cleared. People often talk about the story of the London plane in Philadelphia. Or it might be around unclear communication about who's responsible for street trees and their maintenance, or the sidewalk maintenance as well. It also might be more tragic events, things like the rubber factory that caught on fire in 2021 in Eastwick, or more recently, the clear cutting of Cobbs Creek Park in 2022 to make way for a luxury golf course. Notably as well, these kind of tragedies that I'm talking about now have occurred in historically Black and brown neighborhoods. And so to highlight the lack of trust, I want to share a quote from a Cobbs Creek community leader. They said, for the people that I know here, there's no trust. I think it lingers into how people make their decisions. Why would I become a block captain? Why would I attend city council meetings? Because you're, or the city, not going to do anything. You're just going to hurt me. So why would I plant a tree? They aren't going to do shit to support me. They're not going to care. They might bulldoze me out of my home soon. So why would I invest in you, the city, if you don't invest in me? Other stewards did emphasize that there is need for better representation of marginalized groups within urban forestry, especially from Black and Latinx communities. And this is despite the fact that there is increasing efforts from the city and nonprofits in the city to diversify community engagement. There are evidence of meetings still being overwhelmingly white. There's also evidence, that urban forestry as a profession has issues with racial diversification. And this is despite the fact that there are Black and brown residents who are highly engaged in greening work. Again, just to capture the sentiment, Stuart from West Philadelphia shares, I've never been the only one in more meetings than my time as an urban forest steward, like the only woman, the only person of color, the only Black person. And so I'm acutely aware of that. And I think that kind of mirrors the absence of folks that are impacted by a lot of environmental decisions in the city. Many urban forest stewards also value community street tree planting, and they recognize its many benefits, but also raise concerns about a volunteer-based model, citing that responsibilities and workload can be at times overwhelming and unrealistic. In addition, affluent white communities often secure more tree applications and are able to attract citywide volunteer support as a result, based on demand and need. Street tree planting programs that rely both on volunteers and place the responsibility and liability of sidewalk maintenance onto homeowners have the potential to widen existing inequities, disproportionately benefiting affluent neighborhoods. Some racialized stewards also expressed discomfort planting trees in gentrifying areas due to concerns that they might be contributing to rising property taxes and the displacement of long-term Black residents, concerns that are often overlooked by white volunteer groups, even when planting in historically Black neighborhoods. It's just an image that's kind of representing that a little bit. And again, to illustrate this sentiment, a steward from Cobbs Creek who was planting at an event in Fishtown shared, at that event, I was not happy. For me as a Black woman walking into a space to do something I feel good about, but then I see no other Black people. And I'm not just seeing no other Black people, I'm not even servicing any other Black or brown people. I'm not servicing anybody who looks like me, who's been treated like me in this city or in this country, in this world. I see nothing but a sea of white. And it's like, okay, you want me to do labor? What is this? Like, I'm not enjoying this. And so despite these complex sociopolitical and structural barriers to engagement in greening, which are of course rooted in systemic racism, stewards remain committed to addressing environmental injustices. They emphasize the importance of things like recognizing, listening, dialoguing, and validating the perspectives and experiences of their neighbors, practices fundamental to building trust and to advancing recognitional justice in urban forest planning. And just to capture this, another steward from West Philadelphia shared, there's enthusiasm around being engaged with trees in our neighborhood, but that engagement is not like, hey, will you plant a tree? Instead, it's like, hey, let's talk about trees, because people want to voice their grievances. People have stories like, I love trees, but the city did this and the city did that. And so we need to start there. We need to hear those stories and we need to learn how people are feeling before we can move forward. And so a lot of information squeezed into a tight time frame here, but our study does highlight opportunities for more just urban forestry. Rebuilding trust with marginalized communities requires urban forest governance actors to acknowledge systemic inequities, reflect on current practices, and revise policies that perpetuate injustices. Strengthening recognitional justice in urban forestry also requires challenging whiteness, a process that prioritizes white experiences over those of racialized communities. Despite some equity-focused workforce initiatives that are kind of happening across the United States, greater effort is still needed to diversify hiring, to invest in anti-racism training for staff, to strengthen community engagement, especially in Black and Latinx neighborhoods. And while trees alone don't cause gentrification, municipalities must work together collaboratively with other actors to develop anti-displacement policies or support things like community land trusts to help ensure that greening benefits all communities equitably. And lastly, and I think most importantly, there's opportunity for urban foresters to practice humility and to establish ongoing listening sessions that prioritize the experiences and perspectives of historically neglected communities. And so thanks for your time and attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them during the Q&A. Our paper is also available for open access download on sustainability. We'll paste the link in the chat. And I'm excited to pass the mic over now to Lemire, who's going to expand on this topic with his playbook that's focused on centering environmental justice in urban forestry. So take it away, Lemire.